keeping count. Okay, welcome back to what I've literally just found out is episode 9. Like, literally just found out as it was spinning around. Tonight we are going to keep it short and sweet. Now, we were going to talk about something else, and I've literally forgotten what we were going to talk about. But tonight's episode is literally going to be about the Brower College. Probably pronounced that wrong. I really don't give a shit.
I think you're right.
In Warrnambool. So as I said, we're going to keep it short and sweet because I think I'm only allowed so many swear words when we do a webcast. And trust me, I am going to swear. So I'm sorry to anybody that is going to get offended. But
she's already gone to 80% of her quota before we even start recording.
But so I want to. Can I just start off on this because it is
Go for it.
as a female, as a mother, as a parent, as of a boy and yes, he's 22, but hey, when you've got children, they're always babies. I actually found this rather triggering, and I was furious. I could not believe that this happened. This school. Now, if you don't know what happened, which apparently this has gone all around the world, if you don't know what happened, last week the boys at Brower College were made to stand up during assembly. So, and we're talking about the whole school, not just one class, not just 1 year. We're talking about the whole college from ages, I think it was, the youngest was 12 to 17, 18.
Grades 7 to 12, that's right.
7 to 12, thank you. So, yeah, so 12 to 17, 18, depending on, when you turned 18. Were made to stand up and basically apologise for being born male. Now, there's a lot of other things. They were, from what I can understand and what I've heard on news and everything, they were made to apologise for rape and everything else. Now, people like Lisa Wilkinson, this would have been her fucking wet dream. Again, sorry for swearing, really don't give a shit, I'm pissed off. Because her words, when that, and please apologize, I'm begging for apology on this one. I forgot the name of the girl who was murdered in Melbourne a couple of years ago, who was a comedian. And Lisa Wilkinson turned around and said,
Thank you.
Dixon, that's one. I'm really sorry. I did not mean any disrespect for that. But Lisa Wilkinson was the one that said, yeah, we've got to not teach our girls to go walking through the parks at night. We've got to teach all men to stop murdering and raping women. Now, I'm going to bring this up, and it's not that we should thank the men not for raping and murdering us, but how can it be all men? Because if that was the way, every man that Dixon would have passed that night would have raped and murdered her. So it was one person. One person did this. Yep. If we're going to take into effect what's going on in Parliament House, if what happened to Brittany Higgins is true, it's still allegations yet, so I'm not saying it's true or false. If it is true, that's still one person that did it. It wasn't all of Parliament House. It wasn't the Prime Minister of Australia. It wasn't any ministers. It was one person.
There's
they
a phrase
are the people we need to punish.
There's
not
a phrase I've
all men.
Been using lately, typical male behaviour, and it's one I'm really trying to popularise. The reality is hurting women is not typical male behaviour. In fact, most men, it would be an anathema to their nature to try to hurt a woman. As I've said before, men are far more likely to try to help and protect women than to ever hurt women. So typical male behaviour is actually to risk their own safety in order to help women. So the feminists, I don't know if if they, in some cases, they really buy into it, but in other cases, it's just political and ideological. But they're essentially claiming a situation which is exactly the inverse of what really happens, which is the vast majority of men will go out of their way to try to help women.
Exactly. And I think it, and thank you, Justin, for that comment. Can I just, and he's 100% right. A perpetrator is a perpetrator. It's one person. It's not a gender. And a victim is a victim. Again, it's one person. It's not a gender. So if I'd ever been raped, I am the victim. Not every female around me, or not every female on the planet. The person who would have raped me is the perpetrator, is the only person I'd want to see punished. Not every other person that comes under the category of whatever label I can put onto this
That just happens to share a gender with that person.
Yeah. But for now, for my understanding, it was one of the boys went home and told his mum, and it was just I don't think it was anything. Mum, I've got to tell you this thing that happened. It was like this happened at school today, and that boy's since been scared to go back to school because he feels that people are seeing him as a perpetrator. And I've flicked it around as well, because that, to do that to a 13-year-old boy, I would want blood if it was my son. Yeah. I hate the cancel culture. I hate it. It is, we're going to do a future episode on it somewhere down the track. I hate it, but I want the school principal fired because she is essentially responsible. Because there was a full assembly. It wasn't one teacher. It wasn't one year head. It was the principal. Her name is Jane Boyle, principal of Broward College. She deserves to be fired. And I don't care what backlash comes at me at this. It's a fact. It's on the website what her name is. She's written this welcome letter to everybody. She does not deserve to be principal of anything. She can go and stack shelves at Coles. Still a good job, still well earned, still a respectable job, but stay away from fucking kids. Okay, I'm calm now.
Right. Before we go on, and it'll give you a sec to have a drink and relax. And I'm just going to do a little bit of background information. So Broward College is, of course, the school we're talking about. They got the boys to stand up and apologise for the actions of their gender, which, of course, is a form of collective guilt. But Broward College is actually a state school in Australia. So it's actually effectively under the control of the government. It's under the control of the Victorian state government. Now, Victoria, of all Australian states, Victoria is the one that very much is leaning far more towards SJWs than any other state. That's actually the state that Natalie's in. I'm actually in Queensland, and Queensland, if anything, is probably leads slightly away. But Victoria is where we're seeing a lot of these problems. So I wasn't terribly surprised that this actually happened in Victoria. What did surprise me, though, is I wasn't familiar with the school, and I actually thought that it was in the capital, Melbourne, which I sometimes call the SJW capital of the world.
Yeah.
Turns out it wasn't in Melbourne. It's not in Melbourne. It's in a little country town called Warrnambool that I'm familiar with. It's a pretty well-known town in Australia. In fact, I think maybe dairy. I'm not sure what their thing is, but I suspect there's dairy and a few other things that go on there. But I was pretty surprised that a country town, that this sort of happened more in a country town. But it may be that the teachers are, of course, buying into this ideology, and this may explain too why many of the parents are so very upset. And in terms of, if it had been somewhere else, they would have still been upset. But from what I can understand, the parents at the school are absolutely ropeable. So I think Miss Boyle might have to justify her employment. That's my suspicion.
Well, they've come out and said, "Oh, yeah, okay, so it wasn't the right thing to do, but it came from a good place." No, it came from
No.
a feminazi narrative, misogynist place. You can shove that opinion right up your clacker because it was 100% wrong. Don't care where it came from. I understand that they're going to start teaching about God, I'm so angry I've forgotten words. Um, Consent,
Consent, yeah, that's it.
and that's where it originated from.
Mm.
But how can they go from consent to a school full of boys standing up in front of their peers and their fellow students being female and apologize for being male?
Mm.
If this happened to my son at the workplace, I would run down to the workplace and say, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?"
And of course, we've already had an episode on consent, and we've already talked about the many, many problems with the approach that's being taken now with consent and how unworkable it is in a lot of cases. And we see here them pushing it even at a school level. We knew they were doing that. And of course, now it's blowing up in their faces because they took it just a little bit too far. But I have to say, a lot of people have expressed surprise about this, that this has happened. I'm not surprised. If anything, I'm surprised it took this long for something like this to occur. A few years ago, we used to see feminists saying all the time, misandry is not a thing. Well, you know what? It is. And I doubt there's too many people out there who are going to argue that now.
Well, here's my fight, and I actually posted this up on my personal Facebook page. Is when I first heard about this, I posted up on my Facebook page and I said, "This is why I do the tackle box,
Mm.
and this is men's issues. This
Mhm.
is what I'm fighting for."
Yep.
Because everybody thinks it's, "Oh, look at me," that this is what men's issues are. And they sort of go, "What have they got to whinge about?" And it's like, this is a prime example why I do what I do.
Yep.
Because this wouldn't happen. This would not happen the other way around.
Mm. That's exactly
Women
right. There's no chance.
women wouldn't have to, women wouldn't have to stand up and apologize for any of the atrocity. I am a
Mm.
woman and I'm going to apologize for all the children that are murdered within the families.
Mm.
Imagine if they did that.
The Prime
And,
Minister would apologise.
yeah, the president of America would apologize for something that happened in a little country town in Australia.
Mm.
It just wouldn't happen. These
Mm.
people are insane to think
Mm.
that
Mm.
this is okay. And it makes, obviously, and you can tell, and you'd be blind as a bat if you can't tell, I'm angry.
Yep.
Because this is the prime example why more people need to stand up and see what men have to face every day.
So I went to an event on the weekend. This is before the lockdown. We've got a lockdown going on at the moment.
Yeah.
This is before lockdown started. Went to a regular event with some friends. Anyway, one of my male friends, was angry. He's not liking to be very angry, but he's angry about this and about various other things that are going on about the misandry in society. But as I've said to him, as I've said to others, people sometimes look at me and go, "You're not angry, Rob?" Well, you know what? I was more angry, but you know what? Now for these last 8 years, I've been working towards a resolution. I take that anger, that energy, and I redirect it, and I feel much better. Yes, these things are still happening, but I know in my little way, I'm doing what I can to help to improve the situation. So if anyone out there is angry and that wants to know what to do, come and help us. You will feel better. You really will, because I certainly did.
But and you're 100% right. I think that's sort of part of the rabbit hole I was falling down at the beginning of this, that I was angry at so many things.
Mhm.
This one has triggered me as a mother
Mm.
of a male child. But even if I
I
had a
can understand.
female child, I would be just as triggered. And it was on one of the YouTube clips I saw about this, and it was similar to what we do here. Is guy actually turned around, and it was a duo, male female duo, like two of us, and he actually said something really smart. If they were a couple, so if you and I were a couple, and it happened to our child, and you went down to the school and complained about it, you would have proven their point by saying aggressive male.
Mm. Showing some of my toxic masculinity.
Exactly. But if I went down, it would have been, oh, I'm really sorry, Mrs. Brockway, it'll never happen again.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
showing a pedal pathway.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
it shows the misandry of it, because
And the
I
double
would have
standard.
been treated like royalty, and you would have been the typical male coming in as the aggressor.
That's right.
But I have every right to be angry, and you don't.
Yes, men these days, and most men are aware of this, are very, very cautious about where they show too much emotion, because it can turn very bad for them if they show anger or anything like that. That can very rapidly go south. So I think increasing numbers of men are quite careful actually about showing their emotions, especially in public.
Yeah, but it's like, look, as a female, we always get, oh, you're too emotional. It's that time of the month. Um, for me, and fuck, I'm going through menopause, so emotions run wild at the best of times. I watch an ad and I'll cry, and I sit there going, "Are you stupid? It's an ad. It's not real." And I literally do. I sit there and I go, "What the frick do you think you're doing? It's not real."
Mm,
Um, but this one, I think, has got nothing. I can be emotional about it
mm.
because it's a disgusting act. It's not
Absolutely, absolutely.
me. It's not
And it's
me
not.
watching some stupid TV show or watching something really soppy or whatever. This is real. This is happening to our boys and our men. It wasn't that
Yeah,
long ago that White Ribbon were going into the offices and making men sign contracts to say they'd never beat up on a woman. Can
mm,
I just point one thing out, going back to that White Ribbon thing? If every male was going to sign it, now 99.99999% of those men that signed it never would have hit a male, never would have hit a female, sorry, never would have raised a hand to them. That 0.1% was going to sign the contract anyway and was always going to beat up his wife.
yeah, that piece of paper will absolutely stop them. Exactly.
That piece of Nothing's going to stop an aggressor.
No,
Male or female,
that's
nothing's
right.
going to stop it. I'm not a violent person, but on this case, if my child was in that school, male or female, you would have had to pull me back with a friggin' forklift, because
Mm,
I was that angry. I just,
mm. And I
it's triggering, because as a parent, you want the best for your kids, and the safe zone is school when they're not around you. It's a safe space. And for them to take that away from a child, some of these kids still believe in Santa Claus at that age.
I suspect that some of the parents are that angry, if that's the impression I'm getting. But I just wanted to mention and remind everybody that this isn't the first incident we've had quite like this in a school. In 3, 4 years ago, Clementine Ford, who's a well-known feminist here in
Hmm.
Australia, did a presentation at a school, and she refused. It is claimed by people who were there, by many people who were there, she refused to take questions from the boys, only from the girls,
Yep.
and the girls staged a walkout from her presentation. So at the end, because that was during the question section at the end. So that was in a school. This is in a school. This is the type of thing. We've got safe schools going on here in Australia, which has some fairly concerning areas. There's a lot of things going on in the schools that I suspect parents aren't aware of.
Now, with this school in particular, so their motto is, oh, that's the principal's letter. I'm not even going to go into that stupid bitch's letter. But the visions and values are respect, responsibility, and participation.
Respect.
So where's the respect for the male students if they're made
Yes.
to stand up and apologise? Where is the responsibility as the teachers and as a principal? Where's your responsibility to make this school a safe space? And participation, these boys participated in something they didn't even know what the hell was going on.
Mm.
So
So
I'm sorry.
SJWs often talk about things like respect, but if you look, they also talk about inclusivity while their activities are inherently exclusive, and they talk about respect, and they're often the ones who disrespect others. Their respect is often very, very exclusive or limited. So this is very much par for the course with groups like this, unfortunately. I
Well,
also want.
go
There you
ahead.
go.
Sorry.
Okay. I wanted to mention actually something that I mentioned on Facebook as well, posted to my Facebook friends. The World Food Program. So people are shocked by this. Okay.
Mhm.
So, but get this: the World Food Program, which is UN supported, doesn't feed boys and men. That's a fact. It's a documented fact. The leader of the World Food Program admitted it in a speech, and it's been stated repeatedly on other occasions. I've got and I'll post a link below. I've got screenshots. I'll show anyone can look at. This is such. When I first found this about 6 or 7 years ago, it was so shocking. Even other MRAs didn't believe me, and they thought that I'd made a mistake. And they said, "What's your evidence?" And I showed them the evidence, and it's absolutely true. So what they do is they claim that who, when they tried feeding men, the men were in the food distribution area following, say, a disaster, that the men would go and steal the food from women. Okay, which again, I would suggest that's not typical male behaviour. Typical male behaviour would be to protect women, not to steal food from them. Anyway, so they claim this is the reason they do it, and they'll only let women and girls into the food distribution areas. So what? So the question comes up: well, what about families that don't have any women or girls in the family? And they have sort of wave their hands and say, oh, they deal with it on a case by case basis. But I have a great deal of trouble believing they do so in the case of a genuine disaster. It's very, very difficult to deal with a disaster. They're doing disaster response, and they're supposed to be finding the individual families that don't have any women in them and distributing food to them. So now the gay and lesbian community has actually raised this as a concern, because they've pointed out that if there are any gay families, like with two men,
Mhm.
that there won't be any women, may not be any women in the family, and they won't get any food. So this is actually going on. This was most publicised in Haiti, but and there's quite a lot of documentation that surrounds Haiti. But this is a standing position of the World Food Programme. Now, how are people? They're shocked about a school. How's that for being shocked?
So last night I watched an old mini series. Now, do you remember Alex Healy's Roots?
I do.
Right. Okay. So that was from his mother's side of the family. So he
That's right.
did a second one called Queen, which is his father's side of the family.
Yeah.
And there was one, I think it was his grandmother or his great grandmother was Queen. Yeah, that was her birth name,
Queen or
Queen.
Queenie? Yeah.
And she was half white and half black. But she was apparently very fair skinned, so she could get away with being white. And it was just after the Civil War, so she was free to go.
Mm.
And yeah, I won't go into the story behind it, but she was ended up in a soup kitchen type situation. And there was a man going around making sure that everybody in that soup kitchen was white. And Queen got away with it. And a couple of people down, there was another fair skinned African American who didn't get away with it. Now, so it's going into what you're saying. If we picked it as a color, if we
Mm.
said, no, this race isn't allowed this food,
Mm.
there
Could you
would be
imagine?
an uproar.
Mhm.
But it's okay to say it about men.
Yep. With this vague claim that they're going around accosting women. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yep.
But they don't seem to understand. Again, and this goes back to what happened to Dixon. What happened to her was atrocious. The guy, I hope he rots in hell. I'm not doubting that. But how many men did she walk past that night who didn't rape her and didn't murder her? And I'm not saying be thankful that they didn't. Oh, we've got to be thank those men for not doing it. I'm not saying that. What I'm simply saying is there's the proof that not all men.
And in actual fact, if one of those men had, perhaps, I don't know if she did encounter any other men that night, but had she encountered another man and had he been closer, then he very likely would have stepped in at least to scare the attacker away. So,
exactly.
In fact, we had a case here in Brisbane 10 or 15 years ago where there was these cases like this are actually fairly rare, but we really did have a serial rapist here in Brisbane. And he was going around, he raped about 5 or 6 women over the space of about 6 months. And one morning, he was actually hiding in the bushes, I think, planning to attack another woman. And 2 workmen saw him. And initially, they were initially suspicious about it, and then I think they suspected he was related to the attacks, and they detained him, and he turned out to actually be the attacker. So in that case, we had again 2 men out early in the morning, nobody else around. It was looking like he was going to commit another crime, and 2 men jumped him and detained him and held him until police arrived. So this is typically the situation that it'll be men who will jump in and do these things and keep women safe.
If you look at a lot of those videos when you see a fight, you usually do see a man step in and try, whether it's between 2 men or 2 women or man and woman, usually see a male step in and try and break up the fight. The one who's filming it is probably usually a female.
Yep, absolutely. I just want to comment too. John Lambert's made a great comment. Hunger doesn't discriminate, unlike the UN.
Yeah,
I like that. I really like that.
and thanks for that, John. And I mean, I really appreciate, especially this week, we seem to have dropped our audience a bit. This week, I wanted to pick it back up. It's infuriating. We've got to put a stop to all men. The hashtag all men.
If there's a silver lining to this, it's that for a long time, a lot of people denied that this was really a problem. Like I said, they'd say misandry isn't a thing. Well, they're becoming more overt and more aggressive in their tactics, and it's becoming harder and harder for anyone to deny that this is real. This is really happening, and it is a serious problem. It's going to be a very serious problem for the next generation if we don't put a stop to it.
Yeah. Now, but we've only got a couple of minutes to go. I do want to put it out there that if you still don't have a problem with this, think of it as your child, as your son, as your brother, as your best mate, as your partner, as your uncle, as your dad, as your grandfather. These are the men, the hashtag, it's all men, it's attacking. Because it's not all men. And I've seen feminists turn around and go, of course it's not all men. But no, there's no buts. You've got to stop it. You've got to stop the words.
It's not typical male behavior. That's the thing. It's aberrant behavior. It really goes against the grain for men to attack women, to harm women. So the men who do that are a small minority. They really are.
They're tiny. They're minute, and people don't seem to understand that. It is the one-off aggressor. I mean, how can I put this? And I'm not wording it right because I'm angry and tired and I've got a migraine. But if I meet 1,000 men in my life and I get raped by one and beat up by another, so 2 men out of that 1,000, I still can't turn around and say it's all men. I'm not going to turn around and blame the other 998 men.
Exactly.
And it's going to be the same percentages with women. It might be a different form of attack, but it's still an attack. You can't do this to society. You can't do this to yourselves. I am not a victim because of what's happened to another female by another male that I don't know. I am not that victim. And you, Rob, are not the perpetrator because of what's happened to somebody else.
Yeah, I'm not responsible for the actions of others. That's right.
Do not stand up and apologise. If they bring this stupid white ribbon thing, if they make you do it at school, if parents, if you're watching this, do not allow this. Put your foot down and say no, because my child is innocent. My husband, my friend, my father, anyone that you know, do not allow it because they aren't guilty. The perpetrator is.
That's right. And with that, we should finish up.
We're going to say goodnight because we're going to have an early night tonight.
We're having an early night tonight.
Okay. I'll take care and I will talk to you next week. Like, click, subscribe, all of that. You know what to do. Do the YouTube algorithm.
I'll be putting some links down there. Yep. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. Night all.